sat at the corner of the old market street every morning, wrapped in a torn shawl that smelled of dust and old rain, his metal bowl resting quietly by his feet. The street woke up before the sun, and so did he. Shopkeepers pulled up shutters with loud clanks, vendors shouted prices, and the city slowly stretched its limbs. Yet for him, every morning felt exactly the same. Time did not move forward, it circled around him. Coins dropped into his bowl with a familiar sound, sometimes copper, sometimes silver, often nothing at all. Faces passed by like shadows. He could recognize footsteps more easily than people. Some were hurried, sharp and impatient. Some were slow and tired. A few paused, hesitated, then moved on, as if stopping might pull them into his fate. Once, long ago, he had a name that people used. Now he answered only to silence. Hunger had become a quiet companion, never screaming, always present. When his stomach hurt too much, he told himself it was normal. When the sun burned his skin, he told himself it was his destiny. He had learned this language of acceptance very well. It protected him from hope, because hope, he believed, hurt more than hunger. At noon, when the heat pressed down like a heavy hand, he leaned against the wall behind him and closed his eyes. Memories came uninvited. A small house with a cracked door. A woman laughing while kneading dough. A younger version of himself repairing a broken stool. Those memories felt like stories from another man's life. That man had dreams. This man only had days to survive. Somewhere along the way, after sickness, after loss, after people slowly stopped calling, he had told himself a dangerous lie: this is all I am now. People often thought he begged because he was lazy. They did not know how tired his mind was. Every rejection, every ignored glance, had built a wall inside him. He stopped asking questions. He stopped imagining different endings. Even when kind people spoke to him, he nodded politely but did not listen deeply. His world had shrunk to a few square feet of pavement and a bowl. That afternoon, something different happened. A schoolboy, thin and curious, stopped in front of him. The boy's uniform was slightly oversized, and his bag hung loosely from one shoulder. He did not drop a coin right away. He just stood there, looking, not with pity, not with fear, but with interest. The beggar felt uncomfortable. Being invisible was easier than being seen. The question felt heavier than it should have. No one had asked him why in years. People assumed they already knew the answer. He thought for a moment, then replied honestly, because this is all I know. The boy frowned, as if thinking very hard. My teacher says the mind is like a door, he said. If you keep it closed, the room never changes. But if you open it, even a little, light comes in. The words were simple, spoken without drama, yet they landed deep. Before the beggar could respond, the boy smiled, placed a coin in the bowl, and ran off to join his friends. The street swallowed him whole. For the rest of the day, the beggar could not forget the sentence. The mind is a door. He repeated it again and again. He felt something unfamiliar rising inside him, unease mixed with curiosity. That night, lying under the open sky, he stared at the stars peeking through the smoke and wires above the street. He had slept under this sky for years, but tonight it felt closer, more questioning. He asked himself something he had avoided for a long time: when did I stop believing I could change? There was no single answer. It had happened slowly, quietly, like dust settling. Each failure had whispered that trying was pointless. Each kind word he ignored had strengthened his walls. He realized, with painful clarity, that his hands were empty, but so was his belief in himself. Fear crept in. If his life could change, then that meant he had chosen, at least partly, to remain the same. That thought frightened him more than hunger ever had. Blaming fate was easier than facing responsibility. Yet the boy's words would not leave him alone. As the city fell asleep, he noticed sounds he had never really listened to before: a distant train horn, a dog barking, someone humming behind a closed window. Life was happening all around him, not just passing by him. He wondered what would happen if, just once, he did something different. Not something big, just something small. Next morning arrived quietly, as if the city itself was waiting to see what he would do. The beggar woke before the market noise began, his body stiff from the cold pavement, but his mind unusually alert. For a brief moment, habit tried to pull him back into the familiar routine. Sit, wait, lower his eyes, hold out the bowl. He even reached for it, his fingers brushing the worn metal. Then he paused. The memory of the boy's words returned, not as a voice, but as a feeling. Open the door, even a little. He stood up. The simple act made him dizzy. He had been sitting for so long, physically and mentally, that standing felt like rebellion. People glanced at him in surprise. A beggar was expected to remain still, grateful, invisible. He felt exposed, almost naked, without his bowl stretched forward. For a moment, fear whispered, "Sit back down. This is not your place." But he stayed on his feet, breathing slowly, reminding himself that doing nothing different would only lead to the same end. He began to watch the street as if seeing it for the first time. He noticed patterns. Which shops opened early, which vendors struggled to manage alone, who smiled often and who looked exhausted. Near the corner, a tea seller fumbled with cups while trying to serve customers at the same time. The man's movements were rushed, his forehead lined with worry. Without overthinking, the beggar walked toward him. The beggar's hands shook as he picked up the first cup. It had been years since he had worked for something, even something this small. Water splashed onto his clothes, but he did not mind. The warmth of the tea steam, the rhythm of washing, the simple exchange, it all felt strangely grounding. When the seller handed him a cup of tea, it tasted richer than any he remembered, not because of the leaves, but because he had earned it. That single act became a thread, and he held onto it. The next day, he returned. Then the next. Soon, he began arriving before the seller, preparing the cups without being asked. People noticed. Some still recognized him as the beggar from the corner, but now they saw movement, effort, purpose. A few customers nodded at him. One even smiled. Days turned into weeks. The tea seller started giving him a few coins at the end of the day. The beggar did not count them with desperation anymore. Instead, he counted something else, the moments he did not feel invisible. His body grew stronger, but more importantly, his voice did too. He began speaking with confidence, asking questions, learning the small economics of the street. He observed how business worked, how kindness returned when given without begging. There were hard days. Some mornings, doubt returned heavily. Old thoughts whispered that this was temporary, that he would fail again, that the street would eventually push him back to the corner. On those days, his hands felt slow, his steps uncertain. But now, when fear spoke, it no longer went unanswered. He reminded himself that he was not trying to become someone extraordinary. He was simply refusing to remain who he was yesterday. Help, carrying boxes, cleaning spaces, watching stalls for a few minutes. Each task added a layer to his self-respect. His clothes were still old, his past still heavy, but his posture had changed. He walked differently now, as if the ground beneath him belonged to him too. One afternoon, he saw the schoolboy again, standing at a distance, watching him work. Their eyes met. The boy smiled, wide and proud, as if seeing proof of a lesson taught. The beggar nodded back, feeling gratitude swell in his chest. He wanted to tell the boy that his words had mattered more than he would ever know. The street was the same. The noise, the dust, the rushing lives had not changed. But he had. He understood now that life had never been waiting for the world to shift for him. It had been waiting for him to shift within himself. When his mindset changed, even the smallest step forward became a bridge instead of a risk.